The morning they blocked my driveway, I was already late for work. I stepped out with coffee in hand, briefcase in the other, and nearly tripped over the concrete barrier that magically appeared overnight right across my driveway. Not one, but 3 thick concrete blocks lined up like some kind of HOA punishment art installation. I froze. You've got to be kidding me. I live in a small cul-de-sac in a subdivision called Brookpines. Pretty place, quiet. Until the HOA, run by none other than Bernice McAllister, a textbook Karen with a sharp bob and sharper tongue, decided I was a problem homeowner. I'm Franklin Barnes, a mechanic by trade, and I run a custom car repair business out of my shop behind the house. All legal, zoned, permitted. But Bernice didn't like the look of people driving in and out of my driveway. Claimed it was disrupting the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. Last week, she threatened to fine me. I told her she was welcome to try. I had every document to prove I was in the clear. Apparently, that's when she snapped. I stormed into the HOA office trailer. Yes, they operate out of a trailer like they're some backwoods royalty, and demanded an explanation. Bernice was there, sipping tea like she ran Buckingham Palace. "Franklin," she said, drawing out my name like it tasted sour, "we've had multiple complaints. You've turned your home into a business. That's not what Brookpines is about. It's a one-man shop and I've got zoning approval. You know that." She leaned forward, fake sympathy dripping off her voice. "The board reviewed it and voted. We're revoking your access to the driveway for now, until we're satisfied you're compliant." "You can't revoke access to my own driveway," I snapped. "That's illegal." Bernice pursed her lips like she smelled something awful. "The board has authority over the easement. It's community property. You'll have to find another way in." I actually laughed. "You think you can block me from my own house with concrete?" She didn't even blink. "You'll find we take neighborhood standards very seriously here." That's when I knew. This wasn't about rules, this was personal. Bernice had been gunning for me ever since I outbid her nephew on a home across the street 2 years ago. Petty doesn't even begin to describe it. I called the county. Nope, no permit was pulled for the barriers. Illegal. I called the sheriff. They said it was a civil matter, so I got creative. I pulled out old plat maps from when I bought the property. The main access road was technically private. It was owned by the original developer who went bankrupt 5 years ago. The HOA used it, but they didn't own it. And thanks to a tax auction I remembered seeing last fall, I had a hunch. 3 days later, I was sitting in the county clerk's office, signing a deed for a quarter-mile strip of road. For $1,500, I now own the only paved access into Brookpines, including the stretch right in front of Bernice's house. I didn't say a word, not to anyone. I just waited. Let the concrete block sit until the next HOA meeting. The night before the HOA meeting, the neighborhood group chat lit up like a Christmas tree. People were furious. Not at the concrete, no. Most thought that was just another of Bernice's beautification efforts. What had them panicking was the sudden appearance of a notice taped to every mailbox. "Attention! Temporary road access restrictions effective immediately. Please use alternate routes." The thing was, there were no alternate routes. Brookpines sat at the end of a single access road that curved in from the main county highway. That road, now mine. And I had just exercised my right as the legal property owner to restrict its use pending a maintenance review, of course. Signs went up. A simple chain across the entrance with a laminated sign. "Private property access temporarily suspended." I watched from my porch as minivans rolled up, paused, and reversed down the hill. The confusion was delicious. Somewhere behind me, my neighbor Caleb let out a long whistle. "I thought you were bluffing," he muttered, arms crossed. I didn't answer. I was saving my words for Bernice. By the time I walked into the HOA meeting, the room was already bubbling with complaints. The community center smelled like stale donuts and printer ink. Bernice stood at the front, dressed like she was hosting a charity gala instead of a powder keg. She lifted her clipboard when she saw me, fingers tightening just slightly. "Mr. Barnes," she said, her voice brittle. I'm afraid this meeting is for residents only. I stepped forward and laid a copy of the deed on the table, face up. Then it's lucky I live here and own the road you all used to get here. The room went dead quiet. She didn't look down at the paper. You're bluffing. County Records Office opens at 8. You're welcome to check. A few gasps fluttered through the crowd. Someone near the back whispered, "Is that even legal?" Bernice's eyes narrowed. "You can't just buy a road, that's public infrastructure." "No," I said, tapping the deed. "It was private. Developer defaulted, it went to tax auction. You all assumed the HOA had it covered. They didn't." A man in a golf polo stood up, face red. "You can't block people from getting to their homes." "Didn't say I would. I said it's under review." Just like my driveway was. Bernice's voice strained. "This is extortion." "No," I said calmly. "This is enforcement. I'm just following the precedent you set." She snapped the clipboard shut. "This is a violation of multiple HOA covenants. There will be consequences." I leaned in. "Funny. I checked your bylaws. You have no jurisdiction over land the HOA doesn't own. Which, surprise, includes the road." There was a silence, deep and uncomfortable. A few people started pulling out phones, checking county maps. Others stared at Bernice like they were seeing her for the first time. She tried to pivot. "Let's not be hasty. I'm sure we can resolve this. No resolution until the barriers are gone. They were placed for safety. I've already filed a report with the county. No permit, no contractor records, no notice. That's illegal dumping and obstruction of ingress. I've also got footage of your board members placing them after dark." Gasps again. Louder this time. Bernice's carefully painted face twitched. "You're lying." I pulled out a flash drive and handed it to the sheriff's deputy standing by the snack table. The only reason this meeting hadn't devolved into chaos. He raised his eyebrows. "What's this?" "Security footage from last Thursday night. Shows Bernice and two board members unloading concrete from a rental truck. License plates visible." The deputy held it up like it was radioactive. "You're saying the HOA placed those blocks without permit?" "Correct, on private property, blocking access to a residence." He looked at Bernice. "You didn't report any of that." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water bottle. The deputy walked toward the hallway, calling dispatch on his radio. The tension in the room cracked wide open. A woman near the front raised her hand. "If the HOA broke the law, are we liable?" "I wouldn't worry," I said, "unless you helped pour the concrete." Another voice, older male. "What happens to the road now? I'm opening discussions with the county. They may want to take it over. Until then, access is restricted to residents who aren't actively violating property rights." Bernice's voice came out hoarse. "You can't do that without a vote." "Actually," I said, "I can. It's not an HOA decision, it's a private road." "You made that matter when you weaponized access against me," the deputy returned. "I've got a unit en route. County code enforcement will follow up tomorrow." Bernice dropped her clipboard. It clattered across the tile floor. Two board members quietly slipped out the side door. The rest of the meeting dissolved into noise. People swarmed me with questions, apologies, even a few handshakes. I didn't stay long. I had what I needed. By morning, the barriers were gone. A quiet crew in an unmarked truck came before sunrise and hauled them away. No one spoke. No one asked questions, but the fallout didn't stop there. 2 days later, I got a call from the county attorney. He'd seen the footage. Turns out, illegally blocking access to someone's home can carry criminal penalties when it involves physical barriers. Especially when it's done without permits on property not owned by the perpetrators. The county filed charges. Bernice was arrested for criminal mischief and property interference. The two board members caught on tape were cited and slapped with fines. The HOA's legal defense fund dried up within a week, and the insurance they relied on refused to cover deliberate criminal acts. The HOA president's seat was declared vacant, and at the next emergency meeting, the community voted overwhelmingly to disband the existing board and hold new elections. I didn't run. I didn't need to. But a few neighbors asked me to help draft new bylaws, ones that ensured no future board could ever abuse power the way Bernice did. I agreed. A month after that, a new sign went up at the entrance to Brook Pines. It read, "Welcome home, private road access courtesy of Franklin Barnes." Funny how things change when you stop letting people walk all over you and start owning the road they stand on. 2 weeks after the meeting imploded, Brook Pines felt like a town waking up from a long, uncomfortable dream. There was a strange hush around the neighborhood, like the place was waiting for the next shoe to drop. People crossed the road to talk to each other again. Kids rode bikes down the cul-de-sac without parents glancing nervously at windows. But there was still unfinished business, particularly with the county prosecutor's office, who had taken an active interest in the footage I handed over. By the time I got the call to testify, they'd already uncovered more than I'd anticipated. "Franklin, we need you to come down to the courthouse," said the assistant DA, a lean guy named Kendrick with a calm voice that always sounded like he was halfway through a chess match. "There's more here than illegal dumping." "Thought you'd want to see it." I arrived the next morning, expecting a folder or two. Instead, Kendrick led me to a small conference room where 2 investigators from the Financial Crimes Unit sat waiting. On the table were spreadsheets, bank statements, and a thick binder labeled Brook Pines HOA Financial Audit Preliminary Findings. One of the investigators, a sharp-eyed woman named Daria, flipped the binder open and tapped a page. "Your former HOA president," she said, "has been redirecting funds through a shell landscaping company, payments for non-existent maintenance. We've counted at least 30 invoices over the last 2 years, all approved without a second signature." I raised my eyebrows. "And no one caught that," Kendrick leaned forward. "She made it hard to question. No open meetings, no access to financials. Anyone who asked got fined or cited for violations. We've got deposit logs showing money being funneled into a private account under her maiden name." "Landscaping?" I asked. "On paper. In reality, nothing. No work orders, no contractor logs, and the kicker. The account was used to pay off her nephew's mortgage." I exhaled slowly. "That's why she hated me. I outbid him." "Looks like it." The DA's office had already issued a warrant. She'd been picked up the night before at her sister's place in the next county, trying to leave with 2 suitcases and a passport. They were holding her on fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction pending arraignment. "Is she talking?" I asked. Kendrick nodded, mostly denying. "But her phone's a goldmine. Texts with board members, emails with forged invoices. She even joked about making life hell for the mechanic in a thread with her treasurer." "Glad I could inspire such creativity," I muttered. That afternoon, the news broke. Local channels ran the story under the headline, "HOA President Indicted for Fraud, Retaliation Scheme." They showed footage of the driveway barriers, the road sign with my name, and a blurry shot of Bernice being led out of her sister's house in handcuffs. The residents of Brook Pines gathered in small knots that evening, whispering over fences and driveways. No one defended her. The next HOA meeting wasn't in the community center. It was in the county building, under the supervision of a court-appointed mediator. The judge had ordered a freeze on all HOA funds and mandated an independent audit. What they found made the concrete barriers look like child's play. Over the next few weeks, it came out that Bernice and her treasurer had been collecting special assessment fees for non-existent projects, a supposed security camera upgrade, a gate system that never materialized, and even a community garden that no one had ever seen. The money had vanished into ghost accounts, and at least 5 households had been threatened with liens for refusing to pay. One of those homeowners, a retired firefighter named Greg, stood up during the hearing and held up a letter. She said if I didn't pay the security levy, they'd report me to collections. I asked for a breakdown and she said it was confidential. I live on a fixed income. I skipped meds to make that payment. The judge's expression didn't change, but his voice tightened. The court will be referring this to the state attorney general. This extends beyond petty enforcement. Outside the courtroom, I found Greg leaning against the railing, rubbing the back of his neck. "You really blew the lid off this whole thing, Franklin," he said. "If you hadn't bought that road." "I didn't plan to start a revolution," I said. "Just wanted to get to work without tripping over cement," he chuckled dryly. "Well, you did more than that. The court ordered restitution for every fraudulent fine, assessment, and fee." Residents began receiving certified letters listing the amounts they'd be reimbursed. Some were in the hundreds, others in the thousands. One woman, a nurse who had been cited for excessive overnight parking, got a check for over $8,000. With Bernice removed and the board gutted, the state HOA oversight committee intervened. They appointed a temporary administrator to oversee elections and restructure the bylaws. For the first time, residents were given access to financial records, meeting minutes, and voting procedures. A new clause was added. All major decisions required a 75% majority and independent verification by a third-party auditor. Abuse of power would be grounds for immediate removal. I stayed out of the elections. But people still came to me for advice. Neighbors who once wouldn't make eye contact now showed up at my shop with coffee and questions about zoning, permits, and property rights. I started keeping a binder just for HOA law. Daria, the investigator, even dropped off a packet titled "Your Rights Against HOA Overreach." Then, one morning, a man in a charcoal suit showed up at my garage with a business card and a proposition. "Name's Ellis," he said. "I'm with the State Advisory Council on Civic Governance. We're looking for people to help draft model legislation for HOA reform." I wiped my hands on a rag and leaned against the workbench. "You want me to help write laws? We think your story could help a lot of communities," he said. "Most people don't realize how much authority these boards have. Or how little oversight your case is getting attention." I took the card and ran my thumb over the embossed gold seal. "I'll think about it." That night, I walked the road I'd bought. The pavement was old, cracked in places, but it was clean now. No chains, no barriers. Just the sound of sprinklers and wind through the pines. At the far end, where the cul-de-sac curved into the woods, I saw Caleb patching a mailbox post with his daughter. Further down, Greg was hauling mulch. A teenager zipped past on a longboard, earbuds in. It wasn't perfect. But it was ours again. And for the first time in a long while, no one was watching from behind a clipboard. The first truly quiet morning in Brookpines didn't come with a sunrise, but with the echo of truck tires rolling out of the subdivision county contractors removing the last remnants of the old HOA enforcement landscaping, as the court-appointed administrator called it. The decorative boulders, the faux security posts, even the rusted bench planted in front of Bernice's house like a throne, all gone by noon. I stood in the shade near my garage, sipping coffee that was still too hot, watching the trucks disappear down the road I now legally owned. I hadn't planned to keep it forever. It was more responsibility than I wanted. But the administrator had asked me to hang on to it just a little longer until the new board could propose a community buyback with ironclad safeguards. I agreed on one condition. No board could ever again use road access as leverage against a homeowner. The administrator, a wiry man named Desmond with a habit of tapping his pen on every hard surface, had nodded solemnly. "We'll make it the first clause." By then, the story had started drawing in people from outside Brookpines. Small towns nearby were sending representatives to observe the new HOA elections. A local university invited me to speak at a civic reform seminar. I declined, but sent them the flash drive with the security footage and a one-line message. "Teach them how to spot it before it happens." Then came the subpoena. I was in the middle of patching a cracked intake manifold when a black sedan pulled up. The woman who stepped out was dressed plainly, no badge, no uniform, just a leather satchel and a weary look. "Franklin Barnes?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm Special Agent Dorsey. I'm with the State Bureau of Investigation." May I speak with you about the Brook Pines Homeowners Association? I set the wrench down and gestured to the workbench. Go ahead. She opened her folder and laid down a document stamped with a bold red seal. We've opened a case. It goes beyond embezzlement. We believe several HOA board members, including Bernice McAllister, engaged in fraudulent property seizures across multiple communities. I blinked. You mean here, in Brook Pines? Brook Pines was just one node. We've connected her to at least 4 other HOAs where similar tactics were used: fabricated violations, false fines, threats of liens, and in one case, an illegal foreclosure. All facilitated through forged documents and a network of complicit board members. I stared at the document. How far does it go? She flipped to a page and turned it toward me. We believe the treasurer, Martin Kell, was coordinating with a title agency that no longer exists on paper. But its filings show a pattern: transfers of ownership without proper notification, forged signatures, and backdated violation warnings. In one case, a homeowner died, and the board filed a claim against the estate using a fabricated maintenance lien. They sold the property to a shell company registered in Florida. I leaned against the bench. That's organized fraud, she nodded. We're treating it as a racketeering case. You're listed as a primary witness, given the evidence you submitted and your role in exposing the illegal obstruction. I didn't ask her how long the investigation would take. I already knew the answer: too long, and longer still if no one made noise, but noise that I could do. I spent the next week compiling everything I hadn't already handed over: audio clips from community meetings, typed transcripts of HOA notices, and a full inventory of every homeowner who'd received a special assessment without a vote. I delivered it all in person to Agent Dorsey in a sealed envelope. She read through the first few pages, then looked up. You know, most people would have just hired a lawyer and sued. I shrugged. Didn't trust the process, still don't. Let's see what you do with it. 2 months passed. The new board was elected with near unanimous support. Desmond stayed on as an advisor, and the first motion passed was to dissolve the former enforcement committee entirely. In its place, they created a review council made up of 5 randomly selected homeowners, rotated every 6 months to approve or deny any proposed fines. The second motion, a full forensic audit of the HOA's last 5 years, submitted to the Attorney General's office. By then, Bernice had stopped fighting the charges. Her public defender entered a plea deal in exchange for cooperation. She provided names, accounts, emails, and the entire structure of their scheme: how they recruited board members from struggling communities, promised them efficiency packages, and taught them how to exploit obscure loopholes in local property codes. She named Martin Kell as the architect. He was arrested in Missouri trying to withdraw $20,000 in gold coins from a safety deposit box under a false name. The trial was scheduled for the following spring. I testified during the preliminary hearing. The courtroom was packed, not with press or strangers, but with people from Brook Pines: Greg, Caleb, the nurse with the overnight parking fine, the couple who'd once been too afraid to speak at meetings. They sat quietly as the prosecution laid out the timeline: the shell companies, the forged documents, and the deliberate misuse of enforcement tools to manufacture debt. When it was my turn on the stand, I told them how it started. Not with a lien or a threat, but with 3 concrete blocks in a driveway. The defense tried to paint me as retaliatory, bitter, even opportunistic. Isn't it true, the attorney asked, that you bought the road to control access to the community? No, I replied. I bought the road because they blocked mine. I didn't seek control, I just refused to be controlled. The judge didn't allow rebuttal. The courtroom stayed silent as I stepped down. Not a single person clapped. But as I passed the row of witnesses, a woman in the back nodded once and mouthed, "Thank you." The court ruled in favor of full prosecution. Bernice was sentenced to 7 years, eligible for parole after 3. Martin got 12. The title agency was dissolved, and the state passed emergency legislation requiring third-party audits for all HOA fines over a certain amount. Brookpines, meanwhile, became a case study. The university I'd turned down earlier sent another letter, this time inviting me to co-author a guidebook on community governance. I still declined. But I sent them something better. A full report compiled by Desmond and the new board detailing every reform, every clause, and every protection we'd added. Use it, I wrote. Build something better with it. One rainy afternoon, months later, I stood at the end of the road again. The sign had changed. It no longer bore my name. Instead, it read, Community Access Road maintained by Brookpines Trust protected by vote. I felt someone step beside me. It was Caleb, carrying a grocery bag and an umbrella. Looks good, he said. Let's hope it stays that way. He nodded. Funny how it all started. I know. He looked out toward the trees. You ever think of running for the board? I shook my head. I'd rather keep fixing engines, but I'll keep the files updated, just in case, he grinned. Fair enough. We stood there a while, watching the rain roll down the pavement, clean and quiet. No barriers, no threats. Just a road again owned by the people who actually lived beside it, and that finally was enough.